Hello, and we've got another edition of the Boss It podcast. Now, before I start this one, I can say that my guest today actually helped me this morning without him knowing it, which is I had a little bit of a technical issue. So my normal setup, which I sort of leave here and all I need to do is turn it on, was playing up, had a technical problem, and it got me a bit frustrated. So I knew I had to switch things over to the iPad. And Daniel Priestley, who's my guest today, said, well, let's just give it a try anyway. And I thought, actually, he's absolutely right. And isn't that a good indication of how you should treat business and life sometimes? Is things go wrong, but you give it a try anyway, and you see how things turn out. So thank you very much for that, Daniel, and welcome to the Boss It podcast.
No one's listening to this for our singing voices, so hopefully we can make up with it with good content.
Yeah, that's true. Yes. Yeah. So the sound quality may not be perfect, but what we're going to say will be, won't it, Daniel?
Oh, it'll be phenomenal.
It will be. Tell us a little bit about your background, because I know that you started out in Australia, had some really good success over there, but now based here in the UK.
Yeah. So born in Australia, I started my first company when I was 21. It was a very fast growth company. Before starting the business, I'd had 2 years working for a mentor who taught me a lot, and it was an incredible 2-year experience. We started with 3 people, ended up with 60 people. So I was employee number 3, and then we ended up with 60. And then I quit. I started my first business at 21, grew it into a $10.7 million business in 3 or 4 years. So from between 2002 and 2005-6, right on the sort of Christmas, January, we were doing the final deal to finish it up. And then in 2006, moved to London to have a bit of fun, arrived knowing nobody with a suitcase and a credit card, and started another business, which became a global business. Today, we have offices in London, Sydney, Toronto. We've got 3,500 clients. We work with entrepreneurs all over the world. So basically, we've got an entrepreneur accelerator program. It's a 12-month cohort of 50 people that we've been doing since 2010 in that format. And then the other thing, there's a couple of sides to what I do. In 2019, identified a piece of technology we had developed for ourselves that was really effective, and decided to spin that out into a new company with my co-founder, Steve. And we ended up building a very fast growth marketing tech business that does online assessments and quizzes called Score App. Yeah, and then along the last 10 years, I've written 4 books on entrepreneurship, which kind of get a bit of publicity and a bit of press. And I've just basically been documenting my own entrepreneurial journey into books, and putting them out there and sharing what we learn.
I think the scorecard marketing book is your 5th book now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think I've got Scorecard Marketing. It's only a small book. Most of my books are like 40 to 60,000 words. Scorecard Marketing is 24,000. It's punchy, it's sharp. Yeah, key person.
That's the first one where I came across you actually many years ago.
Yeah,
key person of influence.
Now, just on that, personal brand today is the biggest conversation in the boardrooms. You know, we've got to have more of a personal brand out there. Yeah, no, that book was 2009, 2010 that came out. So, you know, it was a little bit ahead of trend.
Yeah, I know. I remember reading it and thinking this makes a lot of sense. And I'd seen that idea about people being a center of influence, about being able to influence an industry and people gravitating towards them. And I think that's where then I sort of did a little bit more research on you, and then came along to some of your Dent Global events, which I enjoyed very much.
Yeah, brilliant. And
how much
great people.
Yeah, you have. Yeah. How much do you think that your original desire of wanting to start up a business at the age of 21 was influenced by your father? Because I've met him as well, and I know that he's still active as a consultant. Do you think a lot of that came from him?
Certainly, Dad has been a big influence. When I was growing up, Dad was a school teacher. He was a teacher at my high school and a teacher at my primary school. So I always went to school with my dad. So dad's always been a big influence. He always had side hustles before side hustles were a thing. So, he did a bit of what was called desktop publishing back in the day. And then he did some consulting and all that sort of thing. So he always had the side thing from that. I was hugely influenced by a guy called Randy, who was a McDonald's franchise owner. He owned 6 McDonald's franchises. I worked at McDonald's and I got the chance to spend some time with Randy, who he demonstrated that you could just own businesses that make millions and never show up and never be there. We probably saw Randy. We probably saw him once a quarter for a few hours. He popped into the store and we'd go, oh, the owner's here, and and that was incredibly impressive. And I got the chance to have a few good chats with him, which was really cool. And then I was hugely influenced. My dad actually introduced me to the startup when I was 19, where I was employee number 3. And that was a massive influence. I can't tell you, I was doing probably 60 hours a week, maybe more, 60, 70 hours a week, quite a lot for 2 years. And we built that business really rapidly, and it was just incredible. And I worked very closely with an experienced founder, and I got to sit in on meetings that normally 19-year-olds don't get to sit in on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that early experience, being able to start that early. I had a similar sort of background to yourself with my father. He always had the side hustle that was doing things. He always used to involve me. And from a young age, you pick up things without realizing it. And by the way, something that you probably don't know is your father helped me because...
Did he?
Yeah, he did. There was, if you remember, Dent Global, they run this sort of presentation competition, and they do it in 2 stages. And I've been in a few presentation competitions before, and I've always done well. And I did the Dent one, and I got through to the final in the afternoon, was the first person on, and came about last. And I walked off stage, and the first person to come up to me was your father. And he sort of put a metaphorical arm around me, and he said, actually, I thought you did better than that. He said, people were leaning into you. But it made me think back, and I thought, I didn't really feel comfortable. And the thing that I learned was about being authentic to myself. I was following a model that I probably didn't have it ingrained. And having that conversation with your father, when I was actually really disappointed, I was thinking, oh God, but having that chat with him really helped me. And I've remembered that ever since.
Do you know, I get stopped all the time with people saying your father helped me, because he's an amazing coach. Yeah. And that's what he does today. He's a business coach. He's chairman of a charity, and he just works with, I don't know, at any given time he's got probably 10, 15 clients, but he also just helps a lot of people. I get so many people who say, oh, your dad really helped me. It's lovely.
Yeah, no, it is. And he was very authentic about it. And it sometimes when you lose, you win. And I think that was the case there. I won.
I massively agree with that. Sometimes, especially when you're quite used to success, sometimes a little punch in the nose is the best thing for you. Oh my goodness, if you're used to winning, it's very easy to get complacent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I've found that in sport and in business. One of the things that I wanted to speak to you about was that I'm seeing in the area of communication or marketing, the last 15 years, there has been an obsession about the channels, about social media. And I think one of the things that you talk about a lot is about data is the new oil.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a positive and a negative with that. But you tell me what you mean by that, data being the new oil.
Let me take you back to 2008, 2007-ish. So Barack Obama was running the presidential campaign, and he was very active on social media 2008. And he had all the social media channels going on full force. He had a massive presence on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and all of these different platforms. And for most people in business, up until 2008, they'd never, ever considered that their business should be on social media, or that social media was anything other than something university students were fooling around with. And then Obama comes along and wins the election, and he wins using social media. And suddenly it was a it was on everybody's radar, right? And then there was this massive uptick where everyone got all over social media between 2008 and 2016. Now, this is actually not a standalone phenomenon. If you look at Franklin Roosevelt did the live radio fireside chat in the 1930s, and that was revolutionary because up until that point, people had only ever used newspapers to communicate to voters. And then in 1960, JFK does a live debate with Nixon on television. And up until that point, everyone had only listened on radio, but Nixon lost that televised debate because he just didn't show up well on television. He was wiping his forehead with a napkin and all this sort of stuff. And then JFK won that election, and they largely said it was down to the massive televised debate, which at the time was the biggest televised debate. So here's a theory, right? The theory is that the US presidential election is the most cutthroat, vicious, aggressive campaign that ever comes along. It's winner take all, it's big budget. So what you want to do is you want to have a look at how did the candidate win, right? What is it that they're doing that got them to win, right? What gave them the edge? It's kind of like in the Formula One. If one of the cars performs much better than the other car, what technology did it use? What did they innovate?
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
What happened in 2016 is there was this firm called Cambridge Analytica, and Cambridge Analytica basically started winning elections for all sorts of different people around the world, including they were involved in Brexit and Trump. And what Cambridge Analytica would do is it would run little quizzes to the voters, and it would elicit clues as to how each individual person was going to vote. It would suck in the data from Facebook and it would get people to fill in quizzes. And then it would then remarket to people based upon their unique preferences. So it would do something called hyper-targeting or hyper-personalization. So let's say that it figures out that you are massively interested in the world of entrepreneurship and finance and growth. So essentially it comes in and it says, you know, your number one candidate is this guy because he's really interested in entrepreneurship and growth and finance, and it just hits you with that. Of course, that's a stretched example. What it really did is it identified, in the situation of Brexit and Trump, it identified people who had issues around fears and anxieties, and it heightened those fears and anxieties. So look, if you're using this technology to win elections unscrupulously, I don't endorse that, but I am interested in the actual technique itself and how it relates to the business world, or I became interested in it. So I started thinking, okay, well, how do you apply Cambridge Analytica to growing a business? Well, it's really down to enriching the data, right? So figuring out how can you get more data about every single person that you have, and then hyper segmenting or targeting each individual with unique messages that are right for them, and basically trying to have much more of a personalized conversation with people at scale. So our answer to this was, let's get everyone to fill in an assessment, a quiz, and then based on how they answer the quiz questions, let's give them content that really relates to where they are. So if I'm asking you a question like, are you starting a business, scaling a business, or exiting a business? And you say, I'm starting a new business. Great. Well, here's some content about how to start a business. I'm scaling a business. Okay. Well, here's some content on that. I'm exiting a business. Okay, great. Here's a podcast you should listen to on that. So essentially, by just simply asking a couple of questions, you can then start giving people more of what they want, and then you become a much more interesting brand in their eyes. So we did this. We launched something called the Key Person of Influence Scorecard. 90,000 people took it. We did hyper-personalization. We got £15 million worth of new business through it. So it was a huge success. And then essentially, we adopted a whole strategy around that. And, that's, not to plug the book too much, but that's what I documented in the book Scorecard Marketing.
That's a good point, Daniel. And I'm glad you brought up the example of JFK. My own example would be, for instance, Winston Churchill, who used the radio very effectively during the Second World War to increase the morale of the British people, but also to combat against, Hitler actually hesitated because of a lot of the things that he was hearing from Churchill. But I think modern technologies initially are always viewed with a little bit of suspicion. Electricity, when it first came into the home, people thought of it as electricery. We don't want any of that. There's a nervousness. And we've seen that with some of the internet. Yes, it can always be used in the wrong way, but you're not advocating that in any way. It's using it in the right way to serve people. in a better way to enable people to get the information that is going to be of interest to them. That's how I'm viewing what you're doing.
Absolutely. So if you went back to 2007 and spoke to a hair salon owner and said, in 10 years' time, you will be a media business, you'll be doing videos, photos, images, blogs, podcasts, all sorts of stuff, and your hair salon will be almost like a little bit of a studio, and you'll be showcasing your clients, and you'll have tens of thousands of people who want to see before and after photos and all this sort of stuff. And they would say, what are you talking about? Like, there's no way we could ever do that. There's no way we could afford to do that. How on earth would we? And we'll say, no, but it'll be free. What do you mean it'll be free? Well, you'll have your phone in your pocket and you'll just pull it out and you'll just hit the Instagram live button and boom, and it'll just be effortless. And you go, but I can't imagine how that would happen. And then fast forward and it's like, I can't imagine how it wouldn't happen. So yeah. Same thing. If I said to a hair salon owner today, in 10 years from now, you're going to be a data analytics business. You're going to be able to figure out exactly what every single client wants, give them a massively personalized experience. Your business growth will very, very much hinge on your ability to collect huge amounts of data and then to retarget and remarket to people based on exactly their preferences. I go, but we couldn't do that. We couldn't afford it. We wouldn't be able to do it and all that. And you say, well, it'll all just happen magically and naturally. That's where the world is heading. Now, obviously, there's evil sides to it. So I'll give you a prediction. Before 2030, I would dare say that the US presidential election, every single voter will get a deep fake video addressing them by name from their candidate. And it will basically it'll be a script that was generated by AI. And it will be, hi, Mark, I'm Daniel. I'm your candidate. I know you're interested in business growth. I just want to let you know what we're doing around business growth. Mark, it's so lovely talking to you. I hope you vote for me, right? And it'll be a deep fake AI generated video with an AI generated script. The one that you get will be different to the one that I get. And you'll be living in your little bubble. I'll be living in my little bubble. Now, you may argue that's evil. You may argue that that's hacking human senses,
but it's not the technology that's evil. It's how the technology is used, because a stick could be used to prop up my tent, or I could beat you over the head with it. The stick in itself is not evil. Yes.
Yeah. A stick has limited capacity to do harm. Look, I'm not necessarily one of these people who is just purely and simply an evangelist. I do see that we are going to create this AI revolution that we're about to go stumbling into. We're about to create some positives and negatives with it, probably quite a lot of negatives as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's one of the things that I'm talking about regularly, is about artificial intelligence, machine learning. I've written an article this weekend that, being in the software sector for 30 years now, I've seen that growth, but it's nothing like we're going to see over the next few years, because that is a level of technology that goes right the way across the software sector. And it not only changes its capabilities, but changes our interaction with that technology, which has always been the thing to hold us back. And we're seeing that increase, but it's going to do that. It really is a step.
Well, it's kind of already doing it. If you look at, so I'll give you the classic, the biggest example I see right now, which is media meets AI, is TikTok. And it is evil. Like, it is pure evil. We are going to look back on TikTok and say, how on earth did we do that to ourselves? How on earth did we do that to our children? So TikTok exploits our weaknesses using an AI algorithm. You essentially, with TikTok, you have a situation where young boys and young girls who are trying to figure out themselves are getting given outrageous content that is engaging but not healthy. And what's going to happen, fast forward to 2030, you're going to have most of the young population incapable of bonding, creating a family, and building a family unit, because they consumed 2 hours of TikTok videos a day. They drove a truck through the attention, the attention side of their brain, and then they also drove a truck through the pair bonding side of their brain, and they drove a truck through their ability to have respect for the opposite gender. We're going to have an epidemic of basically people who end up living very lonely lives. And we'll look back and we'll go, well, of course they do, because we just drugged them all with TikTok. And that's an example of AI exploiting our weaknesses, that it's not about AI. We imagine AI as this like super powerful robot that kind of bursts through the door, Terminator 2 style. But actually, I imagine AI as a little bit more like a very addictive drug that just gets left lying around. And you end up with people who would otherwise be out there working, but they just can't stop flicking through and scrolling on screens. And they'd otherwise be out doing something productive, but they just can't stop playing, computer game that is, that's been artificially built to make sure that they never have more than a few seconds of being bored.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I would agree with it to an extent. I see that not just with teenagers and people growing up. I also see that with adults who are getting a perspective on the world that is very negative. They're seeing lots and lots of examples of bad people and evil things being done, because the more they look at it, the more it's being shown to them. And their view of the world now has changed. They believe that they are surrounded by bad people. And that proportion has never changed. I'm talking to people who are in their 50s and 60s that say the world is a bad place now. And statistically, it's not. You're not in more danger now than you were in the 1960s.
It's the best it's ever been. However, the world's evil has not been able to find its way into your pocket, until recently. So if there was a car crash in Frankfurt, no one filmed it, no one disseminated it. Now, if it's good footage, it's going to hit your social media feed because the footage is pretty engaging. But the other thing too that's destroyed is we're destroying something called our shared reality. So, for example, if I heard some wacky conspiracy theory in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, right? 90s, I've got to interact with the vast majority of people who want to kind of talk some sense into me or kind of find a bit of common ground. And then today we can just live inside our bubble of people who believe the same thing that I believe. I have a vivid memory, Mark, of in the 90s pulling up at the traffic lights and knowing which radio station each one of the other people at the lights were listening to, because there was only really 4 or 5 radio stations that you could be listening to, and you'd been flicking through them on your radio yourself. So you can actually see, this one's on Triple M, this one's on B105, this one's listening to Triple J, right? And you can kind of do that. Whereas today, everyone's got their headphones in, everyone's in their own bubble. If you go on, if you commute today, everyone's doing their own thing. So we're creating a fragmented society with no shared reality. But it's not. Anyway, we've gone down a rabbit hole.
I know. but the sort of the final point on that is AI is a tool, and it's not something that's just running rampant on its own, doing these bad things, because there are parts of the world where they use AI and they show a very positive side to the world to their young people, and they're probably. You can't go too far the other way. There needs to be a balance. There needs to be a balance.
AI could. One thing that I think would be incredibly powerful is a marketplace of algorithms, where you, just like the App Store, you can go on and select which algorithm do you want to plug into your social media. And you can have an education algorithm, you can have a entertainment algorithm, you can basically create an algorithm, because, essentially imagine that there's just different algorithms that are user rated, and people say, I'm looking for an algorithm to help me with fitness, and it's just going to bring you all the fitness content. It's going to, I'm looking for an algorithm that helps me with relationships, and it's going to find all the best cool stuff around relationships, and it's going to bring it up. So all of this becomes user-generated algorithms, and you can have people who train their algorithms based on certain content and then share, here, why don't you have my algorithm and see what I see? So you can start brainwashing yourself about fitness content. So a marketplace of algorithms would be really powerful. The other thing, look, AI is great in some cases. Like, for example, in the medical industry, AI is going to be, a total game changer. I saw a demonstration on video of melanoma detection, And, this thing can look at thousands of images per second, and with a 90-something% accuracy, which is actually more accurate than a physician, a trained physician, they can the AI can tell you, oh, these are the ones that we think these are the ones that I have 100% high confidence that they're not melanoma, high confidence that it is melanoma, and this one needs a second opinion. And it's like just boom, straight into the AI, straight out. It's
not replacing the point. The interesting point there is, it's, as many people are sort of fearful of AI, the important point there is it's not replacing doctors. It's enabling doctors to do more. It's enabling them to be able to make the analysis on those examinations where they're needed. They don't get over. Yeah. When as human beings, we're not very good at the repetitious and the mundane. You need to be able to filter that out. And AI is very good at that. And machine learning can be very good at that.
Yeah, and the doctor can spend more time with the patient, understanding the full picture, and hopefully getting in early, and all of those sorts of things. Although the one thing I will say is I do believe that we're heading into a completely different society, in the same way that the agricultural age had to give way to the industrial age, and society was very different from agricultural. You went from the feudalist, agricultural age to the industrialist, capitalist age of the Industrial Revolution, and now we're going into this digital age, and we will need a new economic system. We'll need a new reality. We'll need a new social contract. All of those things are going to be up for grabs because we have fundamentally altered the way that society operates.
We need to have flexible minds. We need to be able to learn, and we need to be able to look at things in a new way. I mean, the World Economic Forum talks about this stage that we've moved into now as the fourth industrial revolution, which is about how we use that technology. It's not about the technology itself. We've had that since the 60s with the microchip and the internet. Now it's about how do we use things like artificial intelligence and machine learning for our benefit. And that's what happened in the second industrial revolution. The machinery, the technology, the factories were set up, but then they designed them around the use of the people within those factories, and found that there was a massive benefit in being able to do that. People were happier, and the people who owned those factories produced more products. And we're doing a similar sort of thing again, which I think is important, which actually leads me to one of the points that I wanted to bring up with you, which is about freeing up your business and linking that to the importance of lead generation. I know we're very much aligned on that. And this is something that I talk about a lot with my clients. Is one of my first questions is, how many leads do you generate a week? How many do you a month? Where do those leads come from? How many of those convert? And the interesting part is, have they got the answers to those simple questions? And a lot of the time they haven't. And if you can't measure it, you can't improve it.
So from the macro conversation to the micro conversation, at the micro level, people forget the most basic fundamental idea of demand and supply. And demand and supply is that if you have a limited supply of whatever it is you do, and you have a massive demand for whatever it is you do, you are going to make a lot of profit. So, for example, last week, Glastonbury tickets went on sale. I had several friends tweeting about the fact that they were deeply upset that they tried and they had 20 browsers open and they were trying to get tickets and they didn't get tickets. Now they've got to try and figure out how to get tickets, and that there was this mad rush because there's 130,000 Glastonbury tickets available and there's 550,000 people who want them. And all you need to know about that business is the demand and supply economics to know how profitable they're going to be.
Because they're oversubscribed, maybe.
Yes, exactly. They are oversubscribed deeply.
You've written a book on that subject.
Yeah. So when you talk to an entrepreneur, and here's how that applies. You say, how many leads are coming in, and how many do you need, and how many come in? Now, if you were sitting down and talking to someone who wanted to raise money, and they said, well, realistically, we can onboard about 1,000 clients a month, and we've got 6,000 people wanting a trial and signing up to the database. You know that you can immediately, with that information alone, you can raise money for that business. That business is going to be successful in the next 12 months. They're probably going to be able to make money. There's so much that tells you about the success, the probability of success for that business. So lead generation, the first, I talked about, I worked for this guy when I was 19 to 21.
Yes.
He taught me all these lessons about business. And the first lesson I remember him saying to me is, Dan, everything's downstream from lead generation. So what that meant is, he said, if you've got a great product or service, but you can't generate leads for it, then forget about how good it is. And if you've got a shitty product or service, but you've got hundreds of people beating down your door, you will be able to figure out how to improve from there. You'll figure out, you'll be okay.
Because you've got enough supply of potential customers to experiment and change.
Yeah. So it's that whole everything's downstream from lead generation. I see a lot of tech entrepreneurs who invent stuff because it's cool and because they can, but they're not sitting there going, wait a second, how am I going to generate a significant portion of leads for this? Especially too, if it's digital and they have unlimited supply, well, then how are you going to create any demand and supply tension? You need to figure that little chestnut out, because otherwise people are going to expect it for free, and you're going to have a way of making it pay.
So one of the big problems of why that happens, I find, in the IT sector is that most of the founders tend to come from an engineering background. So they will work on their product every day, all day long, really hard, but they're not so much leaning towards the sales and marketing. Quite a lot will say, I don't like sales, and they really just want to forget about it. And it's the same with marketing. You've got to be doing it. It's this essential column of a strong business.
It really is. And I see this all the time as well. And, and they really have that kind of like, if I build it, they will come. And if I just add another feature, I've built a Swiss Army knife and it's got 25 different blades. But if I add the 26th blade, that's going to do it.
That will make all the difference. I see that also with companies that come to me that are wanting to raise money for their software tech, and they show me their business and they say, if you could get me 5 million, then everything would work. And I say, no, because you'll end up with a bigger version of what you've got now, which is a business that isn't making money.
Yeah. And also when you see their forecasts and their spreadsheets, and there's like a couple of lines there of like SEO consultant and
yes.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, so you're gonna grow 10% month on month with an SEO consultant. Gee, that must be pretty good.
We can almost write parallel book on this subject. I mean, I see exactly the same thing. Absolutely. I mean, the interesting thing, I think, what you've created with Scorecard, bear in mind, I've actually used this product, an earlier version of it that you had, and I can see you've made big improvements, and it's something that I'll be using again without Smart. I mean, we've got in the process. So I do believe in it. I really do. And I can see it's essential. But I think the other aspect of this is, one, it will help you generate the leads, but it will also help you to get a much better understanding of the people that you're looking to serve, and to be able to find the ideal customers for you, because it's a case of qualifying in, but also qualify people out that you're not going to then spend time. You're not going to waste their time. You're not going to waste your own time.
Especially in the economy we're going into, many businesses rely upon what I call Cinderella clients. So Cinderella clients are basically, if you take the story of Cinderella, Prince Charming needs to find this woman that he's had a dance with, and there's thousands of women claiming to be Cinderella, and he has to figure out which one was actually Cinderella. So he uses the glass slipper, and he goes and he can very rapidly go, you're it, you're not it, you're not it, you're not it, you're not it, you're her, right? So when we look at a lot of businesses, they don't sell to anyone and everyone. They have to find their Cinderella client, and they have to have a very fast way of identifying whether you're it or not. So using a self-assessment or a quiz, or one of these kind of indicators that we build, that becomes the glass slipper. That becomes the way that you very rapidly, out of 1,000 clients who take it, you can throw 2 or 3 questions into your assessment that very quickly, a combination of how they answer those 3 questions, we build an audience out of that. And then you now have out of 1,000, you now have the 14 who fit the parameter that you're looking for. And now you've found your Cinderella clients. So, and that can be the difference between, scaling really rapidly if you're that kind of business, or getting lost in the noise of the
Spending time
900.
with the right people, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
I have this phrase I often say to my clients is, to find the right customers, we're going to have to kiss a lot of frogs.
Well, yeah, or we're just going to get them to fill in an online assessment, answer 12 questions, and there's going to be 3 hidden questions in there, and the kissing of the frog is going to be like fast.
Yeah. You've automated,
and
essentially you've automated kiss frogging. That's what you've got.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to have to call it Kiss Frog App.
Yeah. Well, it's been really good. I mean, I think, there's a whole extension to this conversation, but I think introducing what you're doing about Score App, it's been a really interesting podcast today, Daniel. And I usually end up by throwing a tough question at the end, because you've had it quite easy so far. So what would be the biggest lesson that you've ever learned in business? Well, number one. And secondly, apart from your own books, of course, what has been the most influential book for you that you've ever read about business?
So I'll answer the second question first. You mentioned my own books, right? I'm not recommending my own books, but I'm going to say this. For anyone listening, you've probably listened to or read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books. Some of them are great, some of them are not so great. Here's what I've learned personally. Number one, writing a book is a phenomenal practice for distilling your information. And I really want to encourage everyone, if you've never sat down and tried to write a book, it's one hell of a process of leveling up your insight. I would say that writing a book is right up there with doing an MBA or something like that, because you're taking all your stories, all your lived experiences, plus it gives you an opportunity to go talk to some people, and you're putting that all into a scalable asset that you'll be able to give to people anywhere in the world, where they can get to know you, like you, trust you, and learn about what you know. And it'll be a new asset that is life-changing. The books that have changed my life the most are the ones that I've written, because it's leveled up my insights and it's given me a scalable way of meeting people. So I would say, number one, going and writing a book is better than reading a book. I would encourage anyone to do that. Number two, I've found that going back and rereading the books that stand out to you has been really game-changing. So, for example, occasionally you stumble across a book and it's like, How to Win Friends and Influence People, or Never Split the Difference, or something like that. And you go, oh, that was a good one. And then you put it down and you go, that was a great book. And then you're on to the next one. And for me personally, I love to set a reminder in my diary for the 6 months, 12 months into the future and say, reread Never Split the Difference. Go back to it. So we're always, books are not meant to be movies. Movies, you want something new every time. You don't want to watch the same movie over and over and over again. But the reason we go to books is for skills, right? To fast track our skills. So the biggest difference for me on reading books is not any particular book, but it's the process of going back and rereading. I love to look through my Kindle and my Audible and go, oh, that's great. How did I forget that book? And then I go back and I push myself the discipline to reread and to relook at it. So that's been a game changer. Some good advice. Here's what pops to mind. I've had nonstop great advice, but piece of advice was Income Follows Assets that I got. Income Follows Assets is essentially the idea that any frustration in your business is an asset deficiency. So if you don't have enough leads, you just don't have a lead generation asset. If you don't have enough money in the business, you don't have funding assets like business plans and forecasts that you need. If you can't sell your business, you don't have a business exit asset. So you haven't got the assets that you need for that. If you don't have a great culture, you haven't got the culture building assets that you need. So for me personally, every stress or frustration or bottleneck in the business is just seen, I relabel it. Immediately, I relabel it in my head as I have an asset deficiency. The asset deficiency that I'm currently working with is lead generation asset deficiency, and I need to generate more leads. What are the assets that I need? And the big exciting assets that we have at the moment are digital assets like media, content, data, and then software and technology and intellectual property. Those are the undervalued assets. Overvalued assets are things like real estate, property, shares in blue chip companies. Undervalued assets, intellectual property, media, and software, which any business could be creating for tens of thousands of pounds and probably will generate hundreds of thousands of pounds. They probably pay themselves back. If you're selective about how you build digital assets, you probably have a 5 or 6 month payback cycle on a lot of these digital assets. Whereas if you buy a house in London, you probably have a 30-year payback cycle.
Yes.
So
yeah, I think that's a very good positive attitude to have towards business. And there are times if you're running a business that there's always going to be those frustrating times that can be really tough. But I think having that attitude of looking at the business and saying, what asset am I missing? It puts something within your control. You can do something about it to put the asset in place. Even if you don't have the knowledge yourself, you can reach out to somebody and bring them in temporarily and get them to help you to create that asset. So I really like that. And I totally agree with you. Going back to books that you've found have been valuable, I think the other aspect of what you described is also when you go back after a period of time, you're not the same person that read it the first time. The person who reads it the second time will read other things from that information because you've learned and you've matured and you've learned more yourself. So 2 great tips to finish. Thank you very much for that. I hope today's recording has been at a technical quality that enables us to be able to broadcast this, because I think it will be valuable for a lot of people. But thank you very much for joining me today. I've enjoyed the chat with you, as I expected to. If somebody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to get in contact?
So you can reach out to me on all the social media platforms like Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. But also check out on Amazon. I've made Scorecard Marketing. I've made it 99p. So that's the cheapest you can make it for Kindle. And if you want a physical copy, just message me on Twitter or message me on LinkedIn, and I'll get a physical copy sent to you if you want that. But if you use a Kindle device, feel free to, for 99p, it's there on Amazon for Scorecard Marketing. I just want to get people to, I want to get people to understand the strategy, because the more people who understand the strategy, then they'll want the technology, right, which we provide. But so obviously it's self-interested, but by the same token, it's one hell of a strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a solid strategy that really you can't argue with. So thank you very much for that. What a great offer to finish with.
Cheers, Mark. So great having a chat with you.
Thanks very much, Daniel. Speak to you again soon. Cheers.